There are a lot of names for elves, as they are the most prolific demi-human in Mystara, bar none. They have at least 6 subraces in the known world, even more if you branch out. That brings us to today's topic, the Eear, aka the Avariel, or the Al-Karak Elam, or in the tongue of orcs, the other white meat. These are the winged elves of Mystara, hailing from the arm of the Immortals far to the west of Brune. But they've recently branched out into the Savage Coast area in the Orcs' Head Peninsula. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and up in the air, Junior Birdmen. The Eear are likely the rarest of the elven subraces, as insinuated in the Orcs' Head Peninsula guide, but they don't give any exact numbers for the total race. It does give the population of their Savage Coast city of Ithawin a hair over 11,000, but how many live in their undescribed homeland is a mystery. They distrust landbound creatures and are rarely seen outside their mountainous regions. They aren't hostile to anyone, but they aren't going to greet you up close either. The only race they're on good terms with are the Induks, the flying minotaurs of the last video. They do tolerate Pegatars, though. The Eear helped save the Induks from extinction and allied with them while they tried to retake their homeland, as mentioned in the previous video. It said they respect the other good-aligned flying creatures, but none are named, so how they get along with the Fenir or other top ballistic creatures is up to you. It also doesn't mention how they interact with creatures that fly around with the help of magical aids, like the Fëdorn and their islands, or the Cloud Giants with their castles. Physically, an Eear stands anywhere between 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall, with their wings giving them about another foot of height if you want to measure those. Unlike the Induks, the Eear can fold up their wings, though not enough to hide them. They can be tucked close enough to the body to enter buildings if they want, which they will never do willingly. More on that fun bit of lore later. The Eear are short-lived for elves, living on average only 300 years. This isn't counting all the times they accidentally fly into mountains, which is a leading cause of death. There are no descriptions of things like hair color in their section, so that's up to the players. They have infravision, or dark vision, out to 60 feet, but they have excellent normal vision that can see clearly for up to a mile. They possess all the other standard elf abilities and speak their own tongue of elven, but they understand the regular elf dialect with little difficulty. They do learn new languages at an accelerated rate, though that's never put into mechanics. The wings are the reason why you're going to be playing one of these guys, so I might as well go over that in some detail. The Eear instinctively tuck their wings behind them when they're not flying, so they're not as clumsy as the Induks in rooms. You can't attack an Eear's wings except from the rear, though there is a slight chance you could clip one if you attack it from the side. The wings are flammable. If they take fire damage, it requires a month for the feathers to grow back enough so that the elf can take flight again. Their wingspan on average is about 12 foot if you're curious. They are fast in the air, moving at 90 feet around in combat. Don't expect to get your Eear homebrew approved in any 5e Adventure League games. If the Era Croca give the Adventure League's DMs hives, the Eear will send them into anaphylactic shock. They can reach heights of up to 20,000 feet, though anything past 5,000 feet is uncomfortable for them. They can't fly if their encumbrance is more than 50% of their total maximum, and wounds also reduce their ability to take off. They can fly for an hour without penalty. Afterwards, they have to start taking constitution checks to avoid becoming fatigued. Eear are reclusive among other races, but they are open and friendly with each other. They sympathize with elves who can't fly, and many don't even believe in underground races because the thought of living where you can't see the sky is horrifying. They believe that every race should try to learn how to take flight, even though this is a bit hard for races like dwarves. They are claustrophobic as a whole. They have to make saving throws if kept in a cage. If they fail enough of them, they go insane and gain a psychosis, and this can only be cured with magic. They will not go underground of their own free will. All their buildings only have the barest requirement for walls. They make for terrible dungeon crawlers if somebody gets the idea that they want to play a winged elf. The Orc Coast Guide mentions this several times, saying that they are a rare race for adventurers because they have more drawbacks than benefits. The Elves have a unique fighting style because of their aerial agility. Rather than land and fight on the ground like the Induks, they prefer to stay airborne and use their speed and maneuverability. They fight in light armor, or glass steel chainmail, and use lighter one-handed weapons. Because of their wings and their need for flexibility, they can't use two-handed weapons in combat, except crossbows, and they're hesitant to even use those. They use a light lance to skewer enemies as they fly by. They never employ shields in combat because they focus on speed and agility. As elves, they have a large amount of magic, and all Eear can cast a continual light spell centered on their chest. They can strobe this light in patterns to identify themselves from great distances. The race has adopted this ability into a form of heraldry. Families will have their own pattern of lights when approaching another group of Eear to identify themselves from afar. They have also used the lights to appear as groups of stars to ships below to mislead them, thinking they're off course and divert the vessels away from the Eear land of Errol. The spell works exactly as the standard version, and can be used to blind creatures if necessary. The race follows 2 different philosophies. Rather than competing schools of thought, they're more like 2 different ways to approach a problem, both with their strengths and weaknesses. The way of the sword teaches them to master their bodies, and that a physical solution is often the best way. These elves embrace warfare and comprise most of the adventurers that they have. The way of the brush is the more artistic philosophy, and it involves showcasing the creative aspects of elven society. The Eear will mix and match these philosophies as they see fit, so you have winged elven knights spouting poetry as they attack, or aerial dancers that use weapons in their performances. Never assume the Eear warrior is humorless, or that the Eear poet doesn't know the pointy end of a sword. And never forget both of them will know magic missile. For the very few that have visited the Eear city of Ithawin, their first memory will be their elaborate glass buildings. The elves have mastered the creation of the substance known as glass steel, which has all the properties of glass but the hardness of steel. They can set the opacity of the substance when they create it, so many of their structures are transparent, except for the few rooms where privacy is needed. The creation process is a carefully guarded secret they share with no one, not even the Indooks. However, they can create as much as necessary, so their warriors' glass steel weapons and armor are standard equipment. In the markets of the cities below, Eear goods will sell for hundreds of times what a steel weapon would cost. But in Ithawin, a glass steel sword costs the same as a steel sword. Before you get any idea about heading up to flying elfland to load up on cool see-through armor, they don't sell to strangers, even if they like you. Then they'll just let you down nicely, as in politely decline, not drop you from 20,000 feet. And if it comes to that, at least they won't be aiming for the picket fence. Eear have adopted to cold, dry climates. It makes sense, they live high in the mountains where rain is scarce, and the tree line is several hundred feet below their cities. They can survive on limited oxygen as can be expected, and despite their hit to constitution, they are relatively durable. Because elves. On the other hand, they do not do warm and wet at all. You're not going to find one hanging out in Houston. This is mostly fluff as they don't have any penalties for being in a swamp, but they will complain the entire time, especially about their hair. These elves come from Devania to the south, and their origins are a mystery to all. It's so mysterious that their source book doesn't fill in any details. They flew across the ocean to the arm of the Immortals, and then a few decided to set up shop in the Orc's Head Peninsula. Why they did this is never explained. They do have an origin myth that does get into a bit of detail. When an elf named Errol once decided to climb the tallest mountain she could find, she reached the top and found a portal to the land of the fairy, where she lived for years. When she returned, she had a beautiful set of wings given to her by the Archfey, and all of her descendants bore these wings as well. This hopefully occurred a long time ago, because that does give off some serious incest vibes. Errol was declared Queen of the Eear, and they named their kingdom after her. Of course, strange fae handing out wings is no basis for a system of government, but it is just a myth. At the top of the tallest mountain in the Orc's Head Peninsula, called the Great Immortal Shield, you will find the kingdom of Errol, where this particular group of Eear live. There's no information on their larger kingdom in the arm of the Immortals. The population of 12,000 is mainly elves, with some Indook and Pegatars in small numbers. The kingdom is located on the plateau of Othrin and inhabited by 4 elven clans. They maintain the plateau to the best of their abilities, careful not to overhunt or tax the ecosystem. They need a large amount of food to sustain themselves, but too much and it hurts the environment in the long run. Because of this, they follow a strict diet, as over a certain weight they can no longer fly. You will never see a fat Eear, as gravity tends to weed them out.
Notice they do not so much fly as plummet.
The largest Eear city in their kingdom is Ithawin, a magical land of glass spires and permanent snow. Because they live on the top of the tallest mountain in the region, and it stays cold year-round. It doesn't stop them from frolicking in their shorts and tank tops, even if their nipples can cut glass on any given day. It's a majestic city, designed so that the light filters through the buildings, creating unbelievable patterns that are works of art in their own right. The glass spires also blend in with the stone of the mountain they sit on, making it impossible to make the buildings out from the mountain unless you were right on top of it. The Eear like their privacy, so this design was intentional. The current threat to the Eear comes from the explorers of the colony of Porto Madacayo, where explorers are trying to climb the mountain to escape from their lives as Villa Verdens. These travelers are seen as rude and gruff, and they don't respect nature. They're not openly hostile, it's doubtful they're even aware of the Eear, but their path is taking them straight towards Ithawin. The elves want to turn them back, but they're not willing to resort to violence. They also don't want the humans to freeze to death in the high altitudes. They are unsure of how to approach the problem without confronting the humans. King Inaran of the Eear is considering using a proxy to turn back or at least guide the explorers away, but he doesn't trust any ground dwellers that could help him. There are Eear adventurers, as I've mentioned, but they are beyond rare. There aren't many flying elves to start with, and their distrust of outsiders, claustrophobia, and weight restrictions make them poor choices to go dungeon crawling. Most other races don't even know they exist, or if they do, they're reduced to the status of legends. They want to be left alone so they can fly around pretending to have purpose in their life. You're not going to find one walking the streets of Slagovich, and capturing one as a slave will only break their minds and drive them insane. If you're going to let someone play one in your campaign, be careful, because they do come with a lot of negatives. That's the Eear. It has been one of the most requested topics of Mystara. They needed more information, and we're lucky to get what we did have. Next week is another topic I should have done much sooner. The Nation of Sind, the India allegory. Well, the first of three. And the punching bag of Mystara, the nation that never got its gazetteer. Until next week, remember, Eear, Eear, O.